Sit. Sit.
That's a nice dog.
Thank you, appreciate it.
I remember you. You came up to me in the park the other day. You told me that I had a nice looking dog, right? You got my dog. My dog. You beat him.
Listen, you want the dog, you give me 10. Simple.
And then when the dog gets all yappy about it, I'm gonna beat his head with a rock.
You just shot him.
He was gonna hurt our dog.
Deep in Brooklyn, Bob Saginowski leads a solitary life slinging drinks at a neighborhood pub. His cousin Marvin runs the joint, which double times as a hub for the Chechen mob's dirty cash. Living a monotonous, melancholic existence, Bob works his usual shift. He spots some regulars honoring Richie Glory Days Whelan, a local man murdered in a cold case, and buys them around out of respect. Marvin quickly intervenes, warning Bob to stop comping Millie's drinks. Despite spending every night there, the elderly woman is notorious for never settling her mounting tab. This news stings Bob, who feels for the isolated lady. He attempts to stand up for her, but his cousin won't hear it. After locking up, Bob heads home through the silent streets, finding solace in the solitude. By Sunday, he slipped into a back pew at the local parish for Mass, disappearing afterward without a single word to resume his cycle. Walking home post-shift one night, Bob is suddenly halted by a peculiar noise. He pauses, searching for where the sound is coming from. He follows the whimpering to a curbside bin in front of a house. Peeking inside, he's horrified to discover a battered little puppy crying for help. While Bob examines the pup, the homeowner, a waitress named Nadia Dunn, confronts him. She's rightfully suspicious of a random guy rummaging through her garbage in the dark. Spotting the injured animal, her hostility fades. She insists Bob bring the poor creature inside so she can tend to its wounds. Once they're indoors, Nadia skillfully mends the animal's wounds, mentioning that her former life at a rescue center taught her the ropes. After the medical work is done, she begins rounding up a starter kit of gear and food to hold Bob over until he can make his own supply run. The sudden burden of care terrifies Bob, who suggests just dropping the animal at a pound. Nadia counters, warning that he might end up right back in an abusive home, and urges Bob to keep him. Still hesitant, Bob tries to convince Nadia to adopt the pup instead. She unfortunately declines, explaining that her night shifts and hectic schedule make pet ownership impossible. This creates a massive internal conflict for Bob, as he weighs his isolated lifestyle against this unexpected, powerful urge to help the poor thing. It's a total shock to his system, leading him to bargain for just a simple 48-hour stay, or maybe 72 at the most. Alright, fine. Back at the tavern the next day, Bob tells Marvin about the rescue, confessing how out of his element he feels about the whole situation. Marvin finds Bob's sudden stress hilarious, telling him to just chill since it's only a mutt. Meanwhile, two thugs named Bry and Fitz are staked out across the street eyeing the pub. This place handles drops, but not tonight. Once the patrons clear out, the gunmen raid the joint. Have you lost your minds? Do you have any idea who this cash belongs to? Despite the warning, Marvin follows their demands and hands over the register's contents. Once the coast is clear, they find their co-worker, Radi, battered and bloodied. They immediately dial 911. When the cops arrive, one officer realizes he knows Bob from the parish. Detective Evandro Torres starts questioning Bob, who mentions a specific detail. One of the gunmen was sporting a shattered timepiece. Impressed by the bartender's sharp observation, the detective scribbles it down. He then asks about the total loss, to which Bob replies it was just the daily till, finding out the surveillance cameras are merely decoys. The frustrated detective finishes his notes and exits. The moment he's gone, Marvin explodes at Bob. Why on earth would you mention the watch to a cop? Marvin is glad the mob's heavy cash was moved earlier, but he knows the Chechens will still be livid about a breach at their bar. Defeated, they lock the doors and call it a night. Come morning, Bob begrudgingly heads over to Nadia's to retrieve the puppy. Admitting he was totally out of his depth, Bob lets a fired-up Nadia take the lead as they hit the store for every last puppy essential. After the moniker Rocco became official and a custom-etched tag was secured, Nadia pointed Bob toward an essential guidebook to master the responsibilities of pet ownership. After dropping Nadia off, Bob heads home to help Rocco get comfortable in his new surroundings. Over the next week, Bob dedicates all his downtime to bonding with and understanding his new companion. At daybreak, a Chechen kingpin named Chvka stops by the pub to rattle Marvin and Bob. To flex his power, he reveals a pulverized victim in the back of his truck as a warning for those who defy him. Before the pair can process the horror, Chfka grills them about the theft. He is frustrated that they have zero info on who would dare strike his operation. Following a cold command, the criminal leader heads out. Locate my associate. After the mobsters depart, a bitter Marvin vents about being pushed around by foreign gangsters. Across town, Detective Evandro pulls some strings with his colleagues to officially take point on the investigation. Bob stays totally relaxed, sticking to his routine and playing with his pup, Rocco. Meanwhile, a panicked Marvin holes up at the house he shares with his retired sibling, Doye, spent obsessing over an escape strategy. Later, Marvin has a secret sit-down with Fitz. He asks about the broken watch, telling him to get it replaced before someone draws a connection. Fast forward a few days, Nadia bumps into Bob and the dog at the park, mentioning her hours got cut at the diner. With a wide-open schedule, she pitches a deal to watch the pup while he's on the clock. Relieved to have a hand, Bob takes her up on the offer, and they swap contact info. Meanwhile, over at Marvin's, Doy drops some heavy news about their dad's facility, threatening to kick him out to a basement-tier home if they don't settle the bills for his life support. Stunned by his sister's dark idea to just pull the plug, Marvin snaps, promising he'll never turn his back on the old man and will find the cash by any means necessary. During a park session, Bob and Nadia spend the whole afternoon drilling the dog on his tricks. The second Nadia turns her back, a mysterious guy named Eric Deeds walks up, praises the animal without even saying hello, and then just vanishes. A random person stops Marvin for directions, sending him into a tailspin of paranoia, thinking the Chechens are stalking him over that missing cash, yet he struggles to play it cool. Suddenly, Eric barges into Bob's place uninvited, boldly claiming the dog belongs to him and brandishing paperwork as proof. He points out a specific security chip account number, telling the bartender to verify the details for himself. Refusing to explain his endgame, Eric pulls a power play by snatching an umbrella from the hallway and leaving. Bob later links up with Nadia to process what happened. While their connection deepens, Nadia reveals her harrowing history with substance abuse and internal struggles, though she's now fully committed to her recovery. Bob, deeply moved by her vulnerability, offers his unwavering support. Bob arrives at the bar to find Marvin on edge. He was just asking for the way. No, he was eyeballing me. I'm not some freaking moron, alright? Later, while the two of them are hauling garbage behind the pub, Marvin vents about the Chechens seizing his business and demoting him to a low-level worker. While Bob suggests his cousin just move on from a hostile takeover that happened 10 years ago, he spots a creepy-looking bag dangling from a post and decides to take a closer look. Peering inside, Bob is stunned to find dollar bills soaked in blood right next to a detached limb, still sporting that shattered watch from the night of the heist. Bob stays cool while showing Marvin, who nearly loses it at the gruesome sight. Marvin had told his associate to dump that cursed watch, yet here it is, a bloody invoice for his own schemes right on his doorstep. He wonders who dropped the cash, and if the mob has finally caught on to him. On the verge of a breakdown, Marvin realizes that if the Chechens actually knew, he would already be in a shallow grave rather than standing there overthinking it, so he settles down to plan his next move. Bob is the total opposite of rattled as he takes the lead, deciding they will just hand the cash back to clear their names. Marvin watches in disbelief as Bob wraps that human arm as casually as Thanksgiving leftovers before heading out to dump it. Does this guy ever blink? Their grim cleanup is cut short when Eric wanders into the joint, acting like it is happy hour and demanding a drink. Caught off guard after the doors are locked, Marvin gives Eric the brush off and shows him the exit, telling him they are done for the night. Marvin circles back to chew Bob out for leaving the place vulnerable during a literal body disposal job, spiraling at the thought of what Eric might have walked in on. Bob does not break a sweat over the near miss, more irritated by the guy's attitude than the risk, and tells Marvin everything is under control before getting back to work. Marvin figures out Eric is the creep wanting the dog back. Yeah, that is Eric Deeds. And since Bob is clueless, he fills him in on the guy's reputation and tells him to watch his back. Bob listens without saying much, skeptical of old ghost stories, but he eventually admits that anyone bragging about a 10-year-old killing is probably a few screws loose and worth avoiding. Moving like clockwork, Bob grabs the package and heads to a local pond to sink the evidence. Back at the bar, a frantic Marvin tries to keep it together while scrubbing blood off the cash to get it ready for return. Over at the bridge, a calm Bob tosses the remains into the water, but his playtime with the pup is cut short when Detective Evandro stops by to grill him about the Glory Days cold case and Eric's potential involvement. After the detective compliments, the dog Bob heads home to find Nadia waiting to take the pup for a stroll. He says he is sorry for being late, then casually asks if she has ever crossed paths with Eric. Nadia says she barely knows the guy, but her vibe shifts instantly into defensive mode. She snaps at Bob for getting in her business and walks off in a huff, leaving him standing there scratching his head. Totally baffled by the day's chaos, Bob ducks inside to decompress with his new best friend, the dog. When he clocks in for his shift later, he mentions the strange blow-up with Nadia to Marvin while they prep the bar. Marvin tries to talk him down, and even the bar regulars chime in, happy to see Bob finally has some girl drama, promising him that the issue is definitely on her end. The locker room talk ends abruptly when Chovka and his muscle, Andre, walk in. The locals vanish instantly, leaving the two cousins to face the mobsters alone. As the boss sits down, Marvin hides his terror behind a fake grin, offering a warm welcome and reaching out for a handshake. The mobster leaves Marvin hanging without even a glance, focusing instead on Bob, who is silently mixing drinks for the crew. Bob hands over the damp cash with zero hesitation, saying he is sorry they are still a bit soggy. Without missing a beat, he pitches them on a new specialty cocktail, promising them it is the best thing they will ever taste. Marvin watches from the sidelines, completely floored that Bob can chat so casually while they are potentially seconds away from getting whacked. Is that drink really the best thing on the menu right now? Thankfully, the mobsters actually like the cocktail, and as they get ready to head out, the boss drops some fresh instructions. Meanwhile, the detective tracks down a local named Jimmy to grill him about what exactly went down the night Glory Days vanished into thin air. Jimmy explains that the missing man left the pub to score some grass from Eric and his buddy Tim, but he never made it back home. Taking it all in, the cop asks if Bob or Marvin might be hiding something, but the question clearly touches a nerve and does not go as planned. That evening, Bob finds Nadia at his place wanting to make things right. She confesses that despite all the warnings, she had a history with Eric until his wild streaks forced her to walk away. Bob tells her he isn't judging her history and makes it clear she is not to blame for what happened to the dog. During an awkward but sincere hangout, Nadia reveals the dark truth that Eric was the one who ended Glory Days, warning that he is a total loose cannon. Bob just nods, saying he has heard the talk. Bob opens up about his younger days when he and Marvin ran a small crew doing low-level jobs for extra cash, at least until a bigger outfit rolled into town and pushed them out. She seems relieved when Bob tells her that he has put that criminal life behind him and is perfectly content just serving drinks now. Across town, Marvin meets up with Fitz, who has been jumping at shadows since his brother's death and is too spooked to even step foot in Marvin's car. Irritated by the paranoia, Marvin lets the guy inspect the whole car just to prove there aren't any surprises, finally getting him to hop in so they can talk while they drive. Once the guy chills out, Marvin drops a bombshell about knowing the Super Bowl drop location, suggesting they hit the mob for the cash to settle the score for Bree. Fitz is horrified by the suicide mission and refuses to touch it, much to Marvin's frustration. Marvin's vibe shifts instantly. He tells Fitz to keep his mouth shut, then coldly announces that he is pulling the heist off whether he has help or not. Marvin tells him he will need a hideout to lay low once the job is done, and Fitz agrees to look for a safe house for him. While they are talking, the trunk pops open. Marvin blames the guy for not latching it right and pulls over, ordering him to get out and fix it. Then things take a dark turn. Just as Fitz steps behind the vehicle, Marvin slams it into reverse and crushes him to death right there on the road. He ditches the car, sprints to his getaway ride nearby, and disappears. Who needs enemies with cousins like this? Later that night, Bob walks Nadia to her front door. After a clumsy goodbye, Bob hurries back home because he is worried about leaving the dog alone too long. It is pretty clear that Pup is now the center of his world. He walks in and starts apologizing to the dog with treats, but stops dead when he sees Eric's umbrella sitting right next to the pup. Realizing someone was inside his house, he knows the situation just got a whole lot more dangerous. The following day, Marvin tracks Eric down to figure out what his beef is. He asks why he would dump a dog in the trash after beating it within an inch of its life. Eric is talking nonsense, but Marvin decides to play into the guy's ego to manipulate him. Meanwhile, the detective digs up Eric's old psych files from a hospital stay and starts looking for clues. Early the next day, Bob gets up with a plan to settle the score and heads straight over to Eric's place. This loose cannon decides to push the soft-spoken guy behind the bar way too far. He demands $10,000 for the pup, which is a pretty pathetic excuse for a shakedown. Things get even uglier when Eric brags about murdering Glory Days and getting away with it, making it clear he is still a very dangerous man. Super Bowl Sunday rolls around, and he stops by to see Doy, who is heading off to a new gig because she is broke, and he gives her a kind hello. Once inside, he finds Marvin acting sick, and claiming he is skipping work, leading to a tense, nasty standoff between the two men. Is this a move out of desperation? Is this something way too messy for us to fix this time? Does Bob actually know Marvin orchestrated the heist? After Bob exits, Marvin sits there fuming over the lack of respect. He cannot stand being treated like a nobody when he used to run this town, and he struggles to keep his temper in check. Back at his place, Bob spends some time with Rocco before getting ready for another shift at the pub. Knowing tonight will be rough, Bob grabs his pistol and some cash before heading out with the dog. Meanwhile, Eric sneaks into Nadia's place to rehearse a pitch to get her back on his side. He kills time with a snack and waits for her to arrive. He needs her to hear him out before he leaves. Across town, Bob is getting the place ready for the massive Super Bowl crowd. The room fills up with fans ready for the big game and cold beer. Before long, Bob and Rudy are slammed trying to keep up with all the drink orders. Between drinks, Bob low-key takes envelopes of cash from various guys and stashes them in the safe for the mob to pick up later. Marvin stays glued to his sofa to watch the game, but he is clearly on edge, like he is waiting for the other shoe to drop. Bob's heart sinks when Nadia shows up with Eric, and he cannot tell if she is there by choice or if that creep is making her. Bob knew something was up, but he kept his distance behind the counter, watching like a hawk. Eric eventually strode over for a glass, pulling Bob aside for a hushed talk. He tells him he will get the cash once he hands over the slip. What slip? Their talk is cut short when Marvin calls Eric to give him a heads up. It is an easy job, show up, do it, and get out. Marvin gets ready to leave his house, tells Eric to chill out, and sets a meeting for after midnight before hanging up. While the crowd cheers, Bob keeps an eye on Nadia while tucking the dirty money into the safe. Once the clock runs out, the bar clears as people head home. The room goes quiet, as only the three of them are left. Nadia tries to explain herself, but Eric cuts in, acting like they are some happy couple back together again. Eric steps outside for a phone call, finally giving the two a moment alone. She tells him Eric was waiting for her inside her house. Then he comes back in, looking twitchy, and asks for more booze. Bob pours him a drink and hands over the $10,000 for the dog. Eric is surprised but just flips through the bills and then says something totally unexpected. He suggests they check the safe too. Bob does not even blink, flatly refusing to let him touch the mob's money and putting him in his place. Eric starts pacing like a caged animal, demanding to know exactly where Marvin is. He claims he can't risk a surprise visit messing up his work, especially since his window of opportunity is closing fast. Bob stays cool as ice while he begins spinning a yarn about his cousin's history. He mentions how, 10 years ago, Marvin was running a predatory lending scheme and cornered a neighborhood boy with a massive debt he couldn't possibly settle. In a last-ditch effort, the kid goes to Atlantic City and actually hits a $22,000 jackpot. The kid eventually shows up with the cash, clearing his name, but Marvin spots a chance for a double cross. He figures he can pocket those winnings to satisfy his own massive debt to the Chachin family. Looking for a way to hide the payment, Marvin turned to his cousin for some backup. This bombshell from the usually silent bartender leaves Nadia and Eric looking like they just saw a spirit. Things go south even faster before they can catch their breath. Eric chokes back his disbelief and attempts to boast about being the one who took out Glory Day, but Bob silences him permanently with a bullet mid-sentence. He hates people who hurt defenseless animals and is just done with Eric. As Bob explains himself, a shaking Nadia just nods along and begs to leave. Bob lets her go and swears she is safe now. She promises to keep quiet, and he knows she will. Bob was clearly living in a total state of delusion. Watching from a distance, Marvin waited for a sign from Eric, but his heart sank the moment Nadia came charging out. He realized right then that his entire operation was a complete disaster. He finally worked up the courage to dial his cousin, and the guy picked up on the very first ring. Since they both knew where all the skeletons were hidden, they just sat in a heavy silence that spoke volumes. Realizing he is completely screwed, Marvin hangs up the phone in total terror. Marvin sits in his car, frozen by the fact that he is a dead man. Later, as Bob chills with the dog, the mob shows up for their money, sees the body, and asks for an explanation. To protect Nadia, Bob tells them Eric was just some drunk jerk who came in alone and started looking for a fight. Chovka doesn't hesitate. He has his crew dump Eric, who he thinks had it coming before, pulling Bob aside for a heart-to-heart. He lets it slip that he knew Eric was Marvin's inside man, venting his fury over such a gut-wrenching double-cross. He admits to tracking Marvin down and finishing him off nearby. Regardless of Bob's blank stare, the killer promises to protect the man whose cousin he just slaughtered, insisting he isn't alone. He wants Bob to run the place and even suggests renaming it Bob's Bar to make it official. Bob processes the news quietly before heading home to feed his dog and finally get some sleep. Days later, a detective stops by. He does not buy the official story about how Marvin died for 1 second. He offers hollow condolences, noting the irony of Marvin being hit in his old stomping grounds. Then, the investigator brings up Eric's sudden disappearance. He notes that Eric was last seen at the bar, just like Glory Days was before he vanished. It turns out Eric was in a psych ward when Glory Days disappeared, so he could not have killed him. He just claimed he did to look tough. Bob does not even blink, as he agrees it is a possibility. The detective just gives him a look and walks away. Later, Bob and his dog visit Nadia. He tells her he will go away if she wants, but asks if she would like to go for a stroll. After mulling over the proposition, Nadia gives the green light and ducks back inside for her coat, leaving Bob absolutely thrilled.